So I have already cut up my foldable and glued it to my paper and put it in my binder. I'm going to start with unit rate from tables. So we're going to have a table of values. And here are two ways to find the unit rate from a table. First method is to find the value of 1 in the left column. The number in the column to the right of the 1 is the unit rate. So if you see 1 in the X, the Y is the unit rate. Method 2 is if there is no 1 in the table, set up a proportion using another pair in the table and a variable over 1 and solve. So because we do not have a 1 in my left column, in my X column, I have to do method 2. So I'm just going to start with 4 and 2. Came over here to become 4 over 2 equals X over 1. I'm going to cross multiply and get 2X equals 4 times 1. Divide both sides by 2 and get X is 2. Alright, so I'm going to cross multiply. I'm going to put this in pen so you can see it. 2 is my coefficient, so I'm going to divide out my 2. Those cancel out to give me 1x equals 2. So there is my unit rate in this particular example, which makes sense because 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8, etc., etc. Right, moving on to finding the rate from a graph. This is a very visual method. You are finding this point, 1 whatever is on the y-axis. Right, when you find the point as your method 1, find the point 1x on the line. This point is the unit rate. So when they say x, they mean that variable that we talked about. It's just in this particular case, we know that that point is y. So x is just my variable. So if that is the case, boom, there is my unit rate, 1, 0.5. 0.5 is my unit rate. Unit rate. And as a sentence, I would say the cost is 50 cents per pound. If you do not have that point very clearly, right, in method 2, if you cannot clearly identify the coordinates of the point 1x on the line, you are going to set up a proportion using another point on the line and a variable over 1 and solve. Right, so going into here first, unit rate from equations. Before I do my real world, finding the unit rate from equations, you have one method. In an equation, the coefficient, we've talked about that being a fancy name for the number next to x. The coefficient of the variable, the number being multiplied by the variable, is the unit rate. So for example, y equals 2x is telling me that y changes by 2 for each x. Done. So there is my unit rate is 2. For this example, my coefficient is 4. Therefore, my unit rate is 4. And lastly, unit rate in the real world. You are going to write the information you have been given as a ratio. Step 1. That's what we've been doing, writing our stuff as a ratio and then setting up everything that we need. So we either going to divide the numerator by the denominator or set up a proportion with the ratio equal to x over 1 and solve. When you just divide the numerator by the denominator, There is your shortcut. All right, so for this example, Margot can run 5 miles in 42.5 minutes. So my units are miles to minutes. How long will it take her to complete 1 mile? When I set this up, this case is minutes over miles as my unit ratio, 42.5 minutes, 5 miles. We want to know how long it takes 1 mile. So that's why I have a 1 right here. I'm going to cross multiply. 5 times x gives me 5x. 42.5 times 1 gives me 42.5. When I divide both sides by 5, notice that I'm still dividing 42.5 divided by 5, 42.5 divided by 5. Hence, when you have that, you just divide them. Boom, there's your shortcut. So if I'd have just stopped there and divided, I would have gotten 8 minutes a mile.